A very good morning to you. Welcome along to Tuesday morning's OTB AM. Eoin is here. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can tweet the show. @OffTheBallAM is the Twitter handle for the show. You can get us on @OffTheBall, or remember to turn on your notifications if you follow us on YouTube. If you don't subscribe already, though, that's a good way to get all the best stuff that we do. A little notification straight to your phone whenever we go live. Eoin.
Morning.
Stoked about the fact that there's an international football match tonight involving the Republic of Ireland. Are there 40,000 tickets gone for this game as well? There might be.
Gone or sold?
Gone, baby, gone.
Right, okay, very, very different. I see somebody writing in the newspapers this morning that promotion to League A is still up for grabs. When I read that, I sort of think to myself, yeah, professional football is still a possibility for me. It's like...
no chance you're playing for Kerry, but you might make it as a pro.
Stating something that is like an absolutely outlandish possibility given what we've witnessed over the last month of Irish football.
But what are you talking about? We had a rebirth the other night. Like, we got back to basics. We showed everybody what we can do. We solidified at the back, and that's the starting point. Into the future, we'll start attacking again.
You're a good company man, I guess, is what you're doing there, Ger. And by company man, I mean, you know, being a good representative of Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane and what they're trying to, the message they're trying to get across. I was having this conversation out in the office there on Sunday afternoon. Like, are we at a point here where maybe it would be more so before Saturday night, but where the Schadenfreude takes over, where we start to actually kind of revel in how bad this team is or how low can we go, sort of thing. Like, you see the Armenian Football Association playing the Liechtenstein national anthem instead of the Gibraltar national anthem. Could we possibly one day be involved in a debacle like that, where we show up to Yerevan and the Armenian Football Association play
the Rose of Tralee?
The Rose of Tralee or something. Like, can we get that low?
Yes.
And I would like to see that happen, because certainly this stagnation that we're experiencing is just a slow dwindling towards Division C and perhaps one day Division D, if you're lucky.
All the great teams, all the great teams. So you look at so Belgium goes through this crisis where they qualify for they host the Euros and they have a disastrous tournament, and at that point they rekindle some kind of interest in youth football, and all of a sudden they have the golden generation. The Germans had a kind of similar rethink about where they needed to go. We're just in the middle of that rethink at the moment.
Are we?
We just haven't seen the players come through from the under-19, under-15 league, and the under-13 league's about to start, isn't it? So, like, in 15 years' time, we'll have at least as good a football team as, say, Northern Ireland or Wales.
We're going to be too old to enjoy World Cups by that stage, though. That's the key point here.
I'm already too old. I am already too old. So, where's the next World Cup?
The next World Cup in 4 years' time. We're in 2022, Qatar. Yeah. How could I forget Qatar?
Yeah, okay. Let's and so when's the next World Cup that's going to be a good one to go to?
After, it's going to be a brilliant one. Canada, America, Mexico.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll be like well able to enjoy that at that point.
And that'll be kind of like your last hurrah to being able to have 2 points in a night.
There's like a third life after, you know, when you get into your 60s and 70s. You go like, I can afford this and I don't have any responsibilities anymore.
Is that what happens?
I think so.
I can't wait for that moment of my life. the lurking cloud of responsibility. It's certainly not over my head, but
oh, it's coming, baby. All this smugness right now.
It's
wait until you get somebody accidentally knocked up in the next 6 months and you'll be like, oh, all of a sudden I'm responsible.
I was going to say, is that not an optional thing, the cloud of responsibility? But as you rightly point out there, it's not always an option.
Let's get on to the newspapers. No, let's tell you what's coming up on the show first, because we've got a great show lined up for you. Jack Anderson is going to join us from Australia to talk to us about the violence in the GAA. He's got a 6-point plan that he thinks we should be at least investigating. There's nothing to see here, though, according to most of the powers that be at the moment. We'll get to that in the back of the Irish News in a couple of minutes' time as well. Casey Stoney is the manager of Manchester United, 130 caps for England. And she was in town yesterday to launch the new 20 by 20 initiative. We'll tell you more about that a little bit later on. We'll bring you our studio interview with Casey Stoney. And, of course, we're going to talk about Ireland-Denmark and maybe even Ireland-Wales, which is happening tonight. Time for the newspapers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought there, because I look down at the front of the Irish Independent and it's Joe Duffy dressed as, I don't know what he's dressed as, but he's going to be the magic mirror in Snow White in the Panto.
Right, okay. That's a nice little mixer, isn't it? It's like either get on the MC circuit, do a little bit of extra work, or join a Panto. And he's opted for option C. Yeah,
I mean, I never once thought of joining the Panto. But maybe you too, when, you know, all goes well, you could have a career in panto.
Well, if you need to fund that cloud responsibility, it might be a good option. So, is he going to be inserting like lines? Is he going to be saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, what's the character?"
Magic mirror.
Magic mirror.
Mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all?
Oh, come on! There is an absolute banker for a talk to Joe line in there.
In the show, he asks the evil queen to talk to Joe, but he makes matters worse when he can't tell her she's the fairest one of all. The part was written for Joe, and he's hilarious, says the writer who wrote it about the actor he's hired to do the role, that he's hired to get free publicity in front of you. He's hilarious. We'll be the judge of that. We'll be the judge of how funny he is.
Yeah, I shall definitely be going to see how...
Here's the thing, I might actually end up having to go to this shit. That's what the cloud of responsibility means, Owen.
Well, I'm
sitting through dross like the Gaily Panto.
Is it? Well, that's it's a really encouraging sign for my future there, that little glimpse into the nether regions.
And that's what landed everybody in trouble. Anyway, the third episode of the Dadcast is out now if you want to be saved from the malevolency that is this show right now. Yeah, okay, so we're going to take you through the newspapers. That's what we do every morning at this time. O'Neill admits Ireland are struggling on very big pitch. The game's in Croke Park tonight. Did you not know, lads? It's been moved from the Aviva to Croker, and it's a huge, massive pitch. We all know, even though it's actually the same dimensions as loads of other pitches around the country, psychologically, Croker is just so hard for these lads to get their head around.
Well, Roy Keane's got the reconnaissance from Páirc Uí Chaoimh a couple of weeks ago to know what a big, massive pitch is like. So hopefully that'll help the Ireland team out. What does he mean by that?
Technically, we're short. We know that. I think everybody can see that. But we're not short of heart.
It's like that scene in the Mitchell and Webb show. I'm not sure if you've seen the sketch where it's Webb who's sitting outside. He's doing kind of like the Ant and Dec job outside after a talent show, and somebody comes out with a Manchester accent and is like, I put my heart and soul into this. And he's like, well, if you put a little bit more practice into it and you actually learned the words to the song and you weren't so shit at singing, maybe your heart and soul wouldn't have been the only thing. It does sort of remind me of Martin O'Neill's press conferences before these games, that we're going to put our heart and soul into it, but maybe if we practice our lines, we might actually get the results.
It's hard to know what to do though, because if he was to come out and like be a circus hailer shouting about how great we are, we'd all be like, that man is delusional. Like, look at how crap our team is. What can you do?
It's true, and I guess a bit of realism is something that we can all associate with. It's something that we appreciate, and like there's an admirable element to that as well. But like when it comes to the Nations League, I'm sick of saying this, we're playing teams that are on a similar level to us, or are supposed to be a similar level to us. The way Martin O'Neill is talking, we're overachieving by being in League B. But maybe we are. Maybe he's right. Maybe we deserve to be in League C. I don't know. Like when we went into this tournament, particularly in the last week, when it became clear that Christian Eriksen was going to be absent, and now for tonight's game, that Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey and Ethan Ampadu are going to be absent. Not only do I see that as a level playing field, I see that as sort of an opportunity for us to go and win these games.
I mean, suddenly Ampadu, who's like played one good game in his life, his loss is like, wow, we really have a chance of winning now. This teenager who's played one good game, we're like, wow, he killed us before, but it has reached a stage where it's a bit ridiculous that we're happy that Ethan Ampadu is out, or that it is, and you're right to point it out, that it might have a material impact on the outcome of the game.
Well, I would say any midfielder who can string a pass together has a material impact in the game against Ireland.
Munster sweat over Earls as Ireland winger set for scan and hamstring. So suddenly Keith Earls and the New Zealand game are being talked about in dispatches. Obviously Earls was picked to play last weekend but did his hamstring in the warm-up, and Darren Sweetenham ended up starting in the game in Exeter. So for the visit of Gloucester, it looks like Earls is going to miss out this weekend. And there are some other injury news. Sammy Ireland is going to see a second specialist about his throat injury, but Van Graan is hopeful it won't rule the centre out for too long. Conor Murray obviously still sidelined, and Albie Mathewson is also unlikely to recover from his knee injury. And the Ross is in danger. It has no sponsor at the moment, so hopefully somebody can get behind the Ross, and we can come back to that story. O'Neill, we lack ability but not heart. We're shit but we're Irish, is basically the subtext. And we'll go out there and we'll fight. We'll die in the trenches. We'll die on that hill even though it's the wrong hill. 2 stars back as Tohill leaves. Galway and Louth have been lifted by the return of talent from Australian rules football, while Derry's Anton Tohill is going in the opposite direction. Anthony Tohill did have a spell in the AFL as well, but did obviously come back to then go on and win an All-Ireland with Derry and also have a trial with Man United. So maybe it's not a complete disaster. Anton is 6'6". Played for Derry under 20 this year and has time on his side to learn the oval ball game, it says here from Paul Keane. It's terrible for your Derry that, like, you know, oh look, that guy, he's Anthony Toll's son. Ooh, look at the size of him.
Yeah.
He's got all the ball skills. Screw you, Australia.
Yeah, it seems that every prodigious talent in Derry at the moment is just getting taken. Like you see Conor Glass a couple of years ago as well. It's like you do wonder if it's kind of worth bringing up these kids to say, look at this thing over here, the shining light of a potential professional, and the AFL suddenly swoop in and take your man. If it's kind of like an element of maybe keeping things under wraps for a few more years, they might have a better chance of succeeding. But obviously, in Anton Tohill's side, this is a massive opportunity for him, and good luck to him. Like, did Anthony not make it in the AFL? Was it a situation where he went down for a trial and didn't get a full professional contract? He
had a spell with the Melbourne Demons in the 1990s. It says, I can't remember the specifics of it, but so Dermot McNichol went down and played a couple of years from Derry, and he would have been the first one around that era that you can remember going down and coming back, and he came back with just like this beefy hulk of a man. But it's like Kildare obviously benefited from having a bunch of players go away and come back. It feels like they benefited in that they were introduced to the professional lifestyle. I don't know, maybe they would have developed into different types of players if they hadn't gone. Who knows?
It's a high-risk game, though, given the attrition of sport down there. People coming back absolutely crocked is another danger. But if you can fine-tune yourself, Tommy Walsh, obviously, he's only getting his sporting life back together now, it seems.
Front foot. O'Neill admits safety-first approach won't be enough against Wales. No, it sure won't. Another 0-0 draw just ain't going to cut the... So he ain't going to pass muster for us today. And then I didn't realise it was 50 years to the day since the protest in Mexico. I guess that would make sense, wouldn't it? The Tommy Smith and John Carlos protest, which is obviously an iconic moment in world sport. So Tommy Smith wins gold, John Carlos wins bronze. They have different hands raised because they had one pair of gloves between them. And then the Australian runner, who is Peter Norman. Peter Norman has a pretty interesting story as well that has been told on various occasions. But if you don't know anything about that Tommy Smith, John Carlos story, it's worth getting the Examiner out today, page 12.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry, I have two more to do for you. So, again, kind of capturing the mood is Emmett Malone. Little in O'Neill's pre-match words to get anyone's hopes up.
That picture of Callum O'Dowda, oh my God.
Yeah.
It is...
Even if you've been sitting under Johnny Walters instead of Duffy, he was like... Don't tell anybody we're screwed.
You could definitely say that Callum O'Dowda there is hashtag mad serious.
He is, yeah. And then Richard Keogh. The return of Richard Keogh, I think, is something we can all get behind.
Yeah, like he plays with a bit of charisma. And that's not... that seems like a throwaway phrase, but it's like whenever he's on the ball, something's going to happen.
Yeah. Good or bad, at least we're paying attention.
Exactly.
I'm like one of the few players you're paying attention to when we have the ball.
I look up and my
phone.
I stop checking my Instagram stories whenever Richard Keogh is on the ball, basically.
There's a great Donald McRae interview with Stephen Hendry. He's got a book out about his complete dominance of the sport. So he won 7 World Championships in 10 years and is in 2 other finals. So the fact that he ends up getting beaten in those other finals when he's at such a high level of dominance is amazing. But he admits that he was a bit of a dick, and when he stopped being a bit of a dick, he started going out with fellow snooker players, for dinner and having chats with them. That his sense of invincibility disappeared and they started to beat him. But then it just completely got in his head, and after a while he couldn't make shots anymore. He says that you're supposed to accelerate through the cue ball, but he stopped accelerating through the cue ball and couldn't play the game. Got so inside his own head that he couldn't play the game until eventually he has to qualify. It's not even in the Crucible. So remember, this is like the king of the Crucible, like the greatest player the game has ever seen. And then he's in qualifying, battles his way through qualifying, and in his first frame back in the Crucible has a 147. Everybody goes, wow, this guy's back. But he was like, yeah, of the 26 pots or whatever it is for a 147, I only hit 5 of them properly. And I knew in that moment that I was dead. That even this last great couldn't enjoy it. But
is that snooker yips right there?
Well, don't use the word yips on, because that trivialises it. He's asked about the yips. And he's like, no, that trivialises. It's far deeper than that. But it is pretty interesting,
Nothing trivial about the yips, I would say.
Because Hendry, he thinks it's trivial. It's because it's such a...
Say that to a golfer.
It's such a bad description of it, It's like, Yeah, no, I agree. If you were to get Hendry and Harrington to have a chat, that would be an interesting kind of...
Yeah, it'd be great.
No, there's nothing trivial about it, buddy. Nothing trivial about it. What, you trivialising me? So look, I don't know, that Donald McRae piece is good, but I would not have been interested in reading a Stephen Hendry book until you actually see, like, yeah, I love being world number one. I hear now other people saying that, oh, I'm there to be shot at, but like, I wanted to crush people. I wanted to be the best. I had to force myself to smile when I won titles because I expected it. It's like Tiger, kind of like, yeah, I just won this. I mean, what's the big deal? Of course I won, I'm the best. But Hendry obviously predates Tiger Woods and had that level of wanted to crush you.
He makes some comparisons with Ronnie in the piece, does he?
Yeah, he's saying that O'Sullivan also doesn't hang out with any of his opponents, and so therefore has that kind of sense of detachedness.
I think that's a little bit different though, isn't it? I think Ronnie O'Sullivan just shows sort of, to a certain extent in his career, at different times, a level of disdain for the sport. And that might be a bit different, where Hendry was a bit more of disdain for his opponents rather than the actual sport itself.
We haven't talked about Gerván Grobler coming back to Thomond Park this week. It'll be interesting to see. I presume he's going to get the great response from the Munster fans that he was getting when he was coming off the bench.
Yeah, I presume so. Like, I can remember the first game he came off the bench last year, after everything kind of blew up the story around him, when everybody suddenly became aware of Grobler's backstory, that when he did come off the bench that evening at Thomond Park, he got a massive reception as the biggest cheer of the night. I think they were playing Zebre, or maybe it was Treviso. I can't quite recall, but yeah, you'd expect a hero's return for Gerván Grobler in Munster this weekend.
It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens there. Hey, that's been fun. I'm looking forward to that. Game you can hear live on Off the Ball. So our ace cracksman ready to put on a show. Anthony Oppenheimer, owner-breeder of Saturday's Kipco Champion Stakes favourite Cracksman, yesterday welcomed the rain that fell at Ascot over the weekend and relished the prospect of his soft ground-loving star taking on stablemate Roaring Lion. And then the stars are out tonight. Absence of Bale and Ramsey points to tight Nations League contest in Dublin. I think it could well be a 0-0 draw this morning, or this evening. What do you think?
That's a very big prediction there, Ger. I can't believe you're putting your neck out like that.
I think that it could, or they could hammer us.
0-0 draw involving the Republic of Ireland.
Could they hammer us?
No, of course not. They have never hammered us in recent memory, have they? Oh wait, they did last month. Like, you just covered all bases there. What are you going for?
Well, I'm definitely not covering the we could win the game base. Could we win the game?
Of course we can.
I know. Can we?
Will we? No.
I mean, listen to this for a team. It's going to be Joe Allen and Andy King in midfield, and then I don't know if we can. It's Tom Lawrence, David Brooks, Tyler Roberts, and Sam Vokes. If that is not a front four to chill you, then I don't know. I mean, I'm terrified. It's almost like the time that Overmars, Kluivert, Van Nistelrooy, Van Hooydonk, and a bunch of others were rocked up.
It's like Firmino, Salah, and Mane, except it's 4 people. That's what that is. Back page of the Herald is "My Dragons Will Roar." Gig says Wales will be up for the fight. I'm looking forward to David Brooks going up to Richard Keown going roar, or something like that, making some sort of impersonation of a dragon. We are terrified. The Dragons are in town. Standing firm, says the back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Nations League is still all to play for, says O'Neill, while Sterling double stuns Spain. Fogarty, we have to ignore the hype. That's John Fogarty admitting that complacency is a big cause for concern for Leinster should it seep into the camp, but he's not saying it is seeping into the camp. Back page of the Irish Daily Star is Crazy Heart. O'Neill hails McLean Passion ahead of face-off with Wales. Then it's top of the morning to you on the back page of the Sun. Beam me up, Scotty, says the back page of this particular newspaper. Hogan is ready. In probably the best Star Trek reference we're going to give you this morning.
Yeah, okay.
Back page of the Mirror is Strikers Wanted. O'Neill may call on his reserves in desperate search for some goals. As I said at the top of the show, I've made myself available. If you need a striker you shall get. Onto the UK back pages. And the UK back pages we shall go. Can I get a copy of the Times there? Because the UK back pages this morning, Ger, are just amazing. They're really absolutely sensational. Because last night was one of the greatest nights in the history of sport. Let's start with Henry Winter in the London Times this morning. It was as good as a 5-1 win over Germany, reads the headline here.
Oh, the bang of the 5-1. I knew that. Like watching Twitter last night, I was like, "Oh, this is their new 5-1."
It is. The rain in Spain seemed to have descended on Andalusia, but the pitch was fine, and England skimmed across the surface like speedboats in the first half. It was one of those rare, unforgettable halves when England played like kings, confident and merciless, and with Sterling looking a world beater. It was a thrilling half of football to rival the destruction of Denmark in the round of 16 at the 2002 World Cup, when England also scored 3 before half-time. England's first half pyrotechnics were even more dazzling than Michael Owen's skewering of the Danes in Niigata. The first half bore legitimate comparison with the second period of the famous 5-1 triumph in Munich in 2001, with the 3 unanswered goals after the break. It was a sensational night for the English. Daniel Taylor in The Guardian as well, hopping on board the hype train, as you've got every right to do, I guess, as a sports writer writing about your team. Any win against Spain is to be celebrated, but to overcome one of the world's most refined teams on their own soil makes this, without any exaggeration, one of the great nights in England's modern history. Even more remarkably, this was England's youngest team since 1959, which is a pretty good stat. So England in dreamland is the back of The Guardian.
Was Declan Rice tweeting last night?
He wasn't tweeting last night.
Did anybody check Declan Rice's tweets or Instagram account? Or
He would bring that average age down even further. You could have your youngest team ever if you...
And he'd get in the team.
Yeah, he would. Sam Wallace as well, saying that Viva the UEFA Nations League, which gave us one of the greatest international games outside tournament football in history. And finally, Paul Hayward.
It's not wrong, is it?
In the Telegraph.
Like, everybody on Twitter last night was raving about this game.
Well, Paul Hayward lands the killer blow here. On a soggy night, it was raining goals for Sterling and Marcus Rashford, which is just pure poetry. Redeemed Sterling is the front of the Telegraph sports section. That could be us if only we won games in the Nations League.
Or if, you know, we'd invested in youth football 10 years ago.
Never mind that. The Nations League.
Like England did. There's a few things, right? The back of the star. Did you mention the son of Ireland?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Stephen Ireland's son's going to play for England.
Stephen Ireland's son Joshua has been called up for international duty by England. The Stoke City teenager has been drafted into the England under-15 squad for an upcoming friendly later this month. Maybe we should make an attempt to try and get at least the children of our internationals. Kwame Ampadu's son, Stephen Ireland's son. This guy's going to be like astonishingly good. He'll be the perfect passing midfielder that England have always needed. We need this guy. We need to get Stephen Ireland back. Let's call him up. Let this son see the dad play one last time in a green shirt. Make peace. Why not?
How ironic would it be if Stephen Ireland's son ended up being the most patriotic Irishman of all time? I was like, I want to play for my country all the time.
Or England's best player, which is more likely at this stage.
Probably more likely.
The other thing is here, it says, there's a story saying, Glazers snub to Saudis. Man United's owners have told Saudi Arabia investors they are not interested in selling the club. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, whose family is worth around $965 billion, is reported to want to match Abu Dhabi's ownership of Man City and Qatar's backing of PSG by buying United. That's the story on the back of the Star, but there is a story on the back of one of the other papers, which I can't actually find at the moment, that says the Glazers are actually headed to Saudi Arabia next week for talks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, an interesting time in Saudi Arabia. Great time to go to Saudi Arabia is what I mean. Nothing to do with the political situation. Just November is a cracking time to go.
Yeah, weather's much better than it is in deep summer.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only factor you really need to take into account when you visit that country at the moment.
All right, that is us through the newspapers this morning. Oh, the Irish News is one left, and I've got one comment for you as well. So give us the Irish News there. So the Irish News, GAA, no plans to change our punishment for on-field violence. So we're going to speak with Jack Anderson a little bit later on. This is a Cara Kane story, who says that it was also confirmed that counties had... we'll come back to the specific details of that, but the plan is that there won't be any specific change at the moment for on-field violence. GAA says there's no plans to make a widespread change to its rulebook regarding how on-field violence is dealt with, but that they would not be found wanting if counties felt their hands were tied by its constraints. So that's the details of that.
There is a couple of other stories, just very quickly on boxing. Floyd Mayweather has, I guess, voiced his interest in fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov in the boxing ring. This is a headline from The Guardian that he screenshotted, put on his Instagram, and says, CBS Showtime and MGM Grand, get the checkbook out. So that's gonna happen. Like, it is quite ironic that if we saw Khabib get into this bout with Floyd Mayweather, and in the press tour got even more racist than Conor McGregor got, and got even more vitriolic And I was like, yeah, the whole facade of me being offended by Conor McGregor's words were all a lie. And I actually love trash talking, but that's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be a very boring build-up and an average fight.
Do you think it'll happen?
But lots of things there. It's a live possibility. Like if Mayweather says give it the green light, then it gets a green light. No.
I guess if you're Mayweather, you've like nothing to lose because you know you're going to just win the fight.
Yeah.
And he won't be able to do anything to you.
But that's not gonna get him as big a payday as a McGregor fight.
Would people be interested? I mean, I guess they would. I don't know. Would you be interested in watching Khabib against McGregor? Mayweather? Mayweather's last bunch of fights were no good anyway. But there still seems to be an appetite to watch people to watch him bore you over 10 to 12 rounds.
But the thing is, it'll be a bigger mismatch than the McGregor fight.
I mean, it might not be any bigger mismatch. It's hard. It might not be.
Weren't we told? I know we didn't really see much of the boxing and show in UFC 229, but weren't we told before that Khabib's not much of a boxer?
He's got that big right hand, though. Right, let's move on to the football. Dan McDonnell was in last night speaking with Joe and making the point that, a result against Wales, it's not just us joking about the 0-0. It's actually really important in the long-term future of Irish football.
If Ireland somehow win, it puts a different slant on the week. It puts a completely different slant on the week. So, without sort of getting delving into it, I think if Ireland don't win tomorrow night, it's very hard to see Ireland not finishing bottom of their group and not being third seeds. It would require going to win away in Denmark, and even then it mightn't be guaranteed. So, winning the game tomorrow is a pretty important way of hopefully giving Ireland the chance of being second seeds in that draw, because like Martin O'Neill makes the point about in his own defence about the World Cup performance. Listen, we were fourth seed at the start of it, we finished second in our group, and in fairness it's a good point. You actually have to say, yeah, I take your point. At this point, Ireland are in control of their destiny in terms of where they can be seated. Like, that's what these games are basically about. And if they let it slip on the basis of like 4 performances this autumn, it doesn't have the same impact next year if suddenly we land 2 pretty decent teams and we're saying, hey, listen, we're third seeds and we're third, what more do you expect? We are third seeds. This is like, we had the opportunity to play very strongly for position against Denmark without Eriksson and Wales without Bale and Ramsey this month. So if we botch that, it's our fault.
Yeah, it's the point that you've been making on since the get-go here, that really, with those players out, against teams of similar standard, we should be going for the victory. Darren, how are you?
Good morning, Ger.
Are you excited about the Republic of Ireland?
I just got some tickets right now for the game. Yeah.
Right. Well,
how did you manage to get your hands on them?
He literally couldn't give them away. I won't shame who in the office decided not to go, but he said, would anyone like to go to the match tonight? And there wasn't a whole lot of interest. So it got awkward for a second. I said, I'll take them.
Oh, yeah.
Really are a magnet for the gold dust.
The good stuff.
Those tickets are gone. Darren has taken them. Darren might not yet show up.
I will show up. If I've got the tickets, my intention is to go.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the country needs support, particularly at its weakest moment.
How grim is it, though, that like you're not that enthused by going to see Ireland play? There was a time where no matter how bad the team was, you'd still get up for it. Even during the Staunton time, like there was the Croke Park factor, there was a bit of excitement around the team, even though they were a worse team than this team now.
Do you remember how bad the games were in Croke Park? That Wales game was one of the worst games of football I've ever seen. And Stephen Ireland.
That was the 1-0 Craig Bellamy game, was it?
Yeah. Stephen Ireland's English son. Irish heart, English blood. What's the Smith song?
That's it there.
That is the name of the title. That's You've named it there. You've answered your own question.
Martin O'Neill?
Yeah.
He's going on the attack for a change, but it's off the pitch because he's been defending his record over the past 4 years after heavy losses to Wales and Denmark in recent months. The pressure has been mounting on the former Celtic boss. Tonight they face Wales in the Nations League at the Aviva Stadium. O'Neill has been defending the players, saying he's doing the best with what he has to work with, and he believes he is still the man to get the best out of them.
One, they want to play for the country. That's really, really important, of course. And most players do, to be fair. But this group of players, certainly in my time here, have shown an incredible willingness to do it. None more so than if you look at James McLean, who broke his wrist in training the day before we played Wales, and he actually was looking for an injection to see if he could play in the game with a broken wrist. James is obviously sometimes not right in the head, but He is absolutely brilliant for us. And he epitomises everything about what this side has been over the last number of years. And we wouldn't have got, I will say this, we wouldn't have got to where we've got. We technically were short. In technical ability, we're short. I think anybody in the auditorium would see this. We're technically short. We're not short of heart. We were well beaten last month in the game, but the players have given absolutely everything they possibly can for the cause.
Technically, we're short.
Reminds me of the last days of Trap.
A little bit.
He would do an awful lot of that stuff.
Non e campione was his line at the Euros. We're at the Euros, like pointing at us, the pudgy Irish journalists, non e campione. And the Italians all like, oh, you're such a genius. I mean, look at these guys. Look at us. Like,
well, why? Were the Italian journalists...
well dressed, suave, debonair, tanned, healthy looking, you know. Espresso drinking.
That's definitely not the Irish journalists.
He used to single a journalist and make a point to him. I remember him telling Emmett Malone one time, Emmett, this is not Brazil. And Emmett didn't even ask the question. He just looked at him and told him. This is not Brazil. Brazil is there. We are not there.
Imagine we're like pining for Trap.
Not that bad yet. It makes matters worse when our near neighbours do so well, because England have kept up their hopes of reaching the Nations League final alive with an impressive 3-2 victory over Spain. Raheem Sterling scored a brace either side of Marcus Rashford's strike to give Gareth Southgate's team a 3-0 half-time lead. They did make it a little bit hard for themselves in the second half. 2 goals from Paco Alcácer and Sergio Ramos put them back into it. And football may be coming back home. I don't know, did you see Kyle Walker's tweet?
No.
The Nations League is coming back home.
At least he's got a sense of humour about it.
At least he's got a sense.
No, he's being fully serious.
He's got a sense of humour about it.
Northern Ireland fell to a third defeat on the bounce. They lost to Bosnia-Herzegovina. A double from Edin Dzeko secured a 2-0 win for the hosts in Sarajevo. While 18-time All-Ireland winner Rena Buckley has given a fascinating insight into the discrimination that female sports people face, the Cork legend shared a story yesterday about attending a medal presentation in the county last year. She was the first woman in Cork to skip her camogie football inter-county teams to All-Ireland success. She's won a record-breaking 18 All-Ireland medals across both codes. She was told by a club official that they didn't want her to present medals to under-12 boys, only under-12 girls.
I suppose in my mind I thought there was this huge shift after coming in women's sport. I remember last year I was asked to present medals to a club team in West Cork. So the boys and girls had come together and they had won the under-14 championship in ladies football and the under-12s in boys. So they asked me to come down and present the medals. So I went along and when I got down there on the night, the guy who asked me took me aside and he said, look, we're really sorry, but like the GA team actually don't want you to present the boys with the medals. This was like an under-12 boys team, you know. So that was absolutely fine, you know. They got some local guy to do it. He was absolutely mortified, like, you know, he could hardly look at me. He was really embarrassed. But that's just the mindset of whoever was organising that. So, like, we're looking for a shift in that, and that's a rare thing now, but it does happen. That was 2017, you know. That wasn't 1986, like, that was 2017. So we're looking for this massive shift, and I suppose this is looking to accelerate that as quickly as we can. And I think it's fantastic.
That's madness. Like, you're a Cork legend. You've got 18 All-Ireland medals. That is madness, and it is terrible that this happened, because it's obviously not the 12-year-old kids who are deciding it.
No.
Crazy stuff. Buckley shared her story at the launch of the 20 by 20 campaign, a movement aimed at increasing the media coverage, attendances and involvement in female sports by 20% by the year 2020. More on the hashtag 20x20. Well, Paul Mannion has described a number of suggested changes to the playing rules of Gaelic football as bad ideas. A number of measures will be trialled in the Alliance League next season. Among them, a restriction on hand passes, a plan to have all sideline kicks forward, the introduction of an attacking mark, the return of the sin bin and a new confusing kick-out rule. Mannion not convinced. He's told the 42.ie that the new rules could cause chaos. He says, I personally think that they are a really bad idea, to be honest. I completely understand they are only proposals and just suggestions, so we won't know until a few of them are trialled, but my initial thoughts were just that they were pretty bad ideas.
Yeah, I think that's carried around a lot of the newspapers as well this morning, those quotes from Paul Mannion. And it's the more time has gone on, the more I think we've kind of woken up to the idea that, oh God, no. If this was all brought together all at once, it will be a bad spectacle for the future of Gaelic football. I'm up for trying them just to see what happens. I just want to be fully sure that these are bad ideas, but the fear is that Paul Mannion might be right.
I mean, the first four are reasonable suggestions on maybe quickening up the game and changing the way it's played, but then the fifth one just is...
Which the fifth one? Kicking out with 45?
The rules about who's where for the kickouts.
Yeah.
It's just going to be so...
Well, what if it's a windy day?
Well, yeah,
we talked about this.
Made that point before, yeah.
The biggest boot in the world of sport couldn't kick the ball out 45 metres because the wind was blowing. So I was like, is that automatically a throw in every time there's a kick out?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be any kind of real world scenarios trialling this. And Mannion also makes the point in a lot of the quotes. He was speaking at an event in promotion of the Dublin Championship, and he made the point that how did they arrive at this? You know, what practical measures did they take to arrive?
In fairness, like they did a lot of work, and they talked to Rob Carroll, the statistician, and like it is definitely a bunch of people who really care about the game. Ultimately,
but who don't play the game.
No, there were player representatives. There were players' representatives on the Standing Rules Committee, or the committee who were doing it. Was it not David Collins? Was it not?
David Collins was involved, I think.
Yeah.
Need Brian Cuthbert involved as well, who would have been managing very, very recently as well at top level. So
look, whoever comes up with whatever rule changes are, it's definitely worth trialling rule changes to see if it improves the game. But the real problem is that the championship structures are screwed, and as a result, you don't see teams who are of equal standard play against each other, except until you get to the Super 8s. And as we've seen, the Super 8s has 2 meaningful weeks of games, and the third one frequently is not that meaningful. So it's such a short season of good quality matches. The league, no one really complains too much about the rules during the league, do they? When you actually have teams of equal standard up against each other, the games are decent.
Yeah, they are. Like, I would contend that some of the games that we saw between equal standing teams in this year's championship,
oh yeah, well, they're good games.
I would contend if you take those alone, it was like a pretty good year. Like, it's not being spoken about it as a good championship at all, because it's just a volume of crap that just completely lingers in our memory over everything else. And like, people will say that the Super 8s was a bad idea. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the case. I want to give that a couple of more years, see how that proceeds. Like, if Mayo had got through to the Super 8s...
Who said the Super 8s are a bad idea?
Well, people... I think the general consensus around the Super 8s this year has been that it wasn't exactly a fantastic spectacle of football. It wasn't as great a festival as football.
It didn't fix things, no. But like, it definitely suffers from comparison for having the best hurling matches early. Like, if the best football matches, if you started with good football matches, and oh, football season's really good, whereas the hurling season was sensational, I was like, well, this is no hurling. It's like, it was far better. There were more good, evenly matched teams playing good games than there have been. There's a load of problems with it. Dublin having 2 matches in Croker, the first round being in Croker instead of at local grounds. Easily fixable things. Like, but we're going to rip up the rule book and make it so teams can't hand pass 3 times in a row, and that's going to fix everything.
But like, we do need rule change if we, at some level. Like, we had this conversation with Niall Moynihan a few weeks back, and maybe the exact function of the rules that he suggested and that this committee has suggested aren't the correct ones, but there is like skills. Like, you can see why they brought in the idea of the 45-metre kick out. Obviously it's a terrible idea because it's never going to work in practice, but they want to get some sort of renaissance of the high catch going.
The problem is, though, when one rule doesn't work, they'll just bin all 5 of them and start again. They will say, oh no, we tried 5 rule changes, they didn't really work, so we'll start again. 2 players confirmed their return from the AFL this week. Kieran Byrne and Cillian McDade have left Carlton. Byrne spent 5 years in Australia, having left Louth at 18. Injuries interrupted his career, though. He played for St Machtas in their Louth intermediate final defeat of St Fecans on Sunday, but he damaged his ankle. He's facing another spell on the sidelines now. The Galway man McDade joined Carlton a year ago, but leaves without making a senior AFL appearance. 18-year-old Anton Tohal has signed a 2-year contract with the AFL side Collingwood. He's the son of former All-Ireland winner Derry star Anthony. He stands at 6'6" tall, and he will travel in November for training ahead of the start of the Aussie Rules season in March. He's following in the footsteps of his dad, who, as Ger mentioned earlier, played with Melbourne Demons in the early 90s. Sarah Rowe also heading down under as well. She's been talking to Off the Ball about next year and signing a deal with Collingwood.
Yeah, off to Australia in 2.5 weeks, so it's coming down my throat now at this stage, so really looking forward to it. A big challenge ahead, lots to learn, but also a great opportunity that I'm really looking forward to.
What is it about the challenge that attracted you to it?
I suppose I've played soccer at international level and then played with Mayo, and to try excel in another sport and have that opportunity to play professional, which is something I've never done, was something that really attracted me towards the sport. And to become the best version of me and be in an environment where I have all the facilities in place to excel. So it's going to be a big challenge, but it's to be able to play professional at any level is just a massive opportunity, so I have to grab it with both arms.
Great night for the Galway gymnast Emma Slevin. She capped off a good week at the Youth Olympics with a 5th place finish in the women's balance beam. Slevin says she exceeded all expectations by making it to 4 separate finals. 2 Irish boxers can secure at least silver medals today. Dean Clancy faces Great Britain's Ivan Price in the semi-finals. That's the men's flyweight division. Dervla Rooney in the semi-final action in the women's featherweight class. On the track, Miriam Daly goes in heat 2 of the women's 400 metres hurdles. Well, finally, snooker, and Ronnie O'Sullivan has raised concerns about the venue for the English Open. He has branded the K2 Leisure Centre in Crawley as a hellhole and claimed he could smell urine in the players' interview area. The 5-time world champion says the event organiser, World Snooker, is cutting corners by selecting the venue. O'Sullivan was speaking after winning his opening match. He told the BBC, "It's such a bad venue, it demotivates you to want to play. This is about as bad as I've ever seen. It's a bit of a hellhole," he added. "I don't know what this gaff is, but I've just done an interview and all I can smell is urine."
At least he said urine instead of piss. Good stuff, Darren. Thanks very much for that. Now, we arrived in yesterday to find one side of the desk had been eaten. Turns out Kevin Kilbane brought his new puppy, Maguire, as in Sam, to work on Sunday.
I'm just 14 weeks, so yeah, I've only brought him into Ireland actually on Friday. So yeah.
Okay. Is it Sam Maguire or Sean Maguire? Which is the
he's going to bring Mayo look in the All Ireland. That's what he's going to do, Dan.
Sam.
So it's Sam, yeah. It's Sam, yeah. So there we go. There we go.
Well, he's a very welcome addition to the studio this afternoon. Probably a bit more welcome than the chat we're going to have today. I mean, the initial thought, you can see him on camera there. The initial thoughts around last night, not as exciting as what Maguire is going to bring to us this afternoon, I dare say. Dan McDonald, you were there last night.
It's indicative of O'Neill's thinking. He's there saying, well, Matt Doherty's going to need cover. Well, no, not really. Like, if there was someone who could actually pass the ball in that position, even a Jeff Hendrick, you could make the most of Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty was totally nullified, and he was nullified by his own manager.
I think when we saw the team in Usain where Cyrus Christie was actually playing, my initial thought was, even though he's going to actually tear this thing, no, but my initial thought, can you imagine if you're Conor Horan? Can you imagine if you're Shawnee Williams? Imagine if you're any one of the players. Alan Brown.
Yeah, look at that. Look, there's the little bits of, I mean, although a dog in the office, I'm actually all in favour of a dog in the office.
Yeah, but we've had many dogs in the office. Keith Andrews' dog is cuter.
But like
Buster.
A permanent office dog.
Oh, permanent office dog, yeah, it'd be good. I would take Kevin Kilbane's, I would take Maguire's level of cuteness if it was a consistent thing. But once in a while, Buster over Maguire.
Buster's like a poodle.
Think so.
A labradoodle.
Fluffy black thing. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you the species of dog.
That was a Weimaraner, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. Kevin said somewhere that I didn't understand, and it sounds like that.
Yeah, all right. Look, let's talk a bit of football. We're going to get to Jack Anderson's thoughts on violence in the GAA in a couple of minutes' time. But first, here is the Danish manager, Aga Harida, on pressing Ireland.
No, I think the ball possession shows a lot, for how the game was in open play. Ireland normally kick long. They have good headers, they're good one-to-one in the air. They're good on set pieces, and there's always the danger the ball can fall down, and something can happen. But it's from our point of view, we went to Ireland to try to press them high and try to stop them from playing, even though we knew that they will kick long. But I think it's not our style to sit back and defend. We are defended well as a team. Even if we try to keep the ball and attack the opposition, we only conceded 2 goals in 2018. So we've been through a World Cup, so that shows that we have the capacity to defend. The difficult part in football is to create something offensively, and especially when people defend well and keep a lot of people behind the ball, it's needed even a little bit more than we managed yesterday.
Uga Harida.
Oh, that sounds completely different to the name you said before the video.
No, I think that you just weren't paying attention.
Fair enough.
You've got spuds in your ears. Look, he's right? Like, there was this kind of, we need to defend ourselves against the charges from the Danes. Like, the Danes weren't great.
I guess hanging in there for the 0-0 draw kind of puts ourselves into the situation where we were against Wales last year, where it's kind of like this one game to sort of decide the next step. That if we win tonight, you know, I know the Danes have to go to Wales in their game, so Wales might expect to get something from that. But we certainly put ourselves into a better position, like having the opportunity to actually go out and win tonight, having lost the other night basically, and even if we win tonight, we wouldn't be looking good. We wouldn't be looking good at all. So you can kind of see the logic behind it in terms of the overall status of the Nations League. I think to say that we are going to get promoted into the top division at this point is, while it's been mentioned today, it's still a possibility. It's not going to happen, and that might be for the best. I think we get challenged enough in Group B, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, but there definitely needs to be some kind of sense of identity and style of play, and something that we can at least get behind to make people want to watch the team, to make people want to be involved in the team. Just like, I forgot to bring the star over, but Dunphy was basically saying, you know, Roy Keane is just a Saddam Hussein lookalike at this point. What does he do? The midfield play has never been worse. It's as low as I can remember since my time playing. Now, there have been some pretty low times in the meantime. The end of the McCarthy era, the Steve Staunton era. But I find it hard to contradict that. Like, it's as bad as it's been with Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, like the thing is it worse than the anger a lot of people were experiencing at, say, the end of the Giovanni Trapattoni era? Like, the fans potentially voting with their feet tonight. We don't know what the attendance is going to be. All will become clear later on. The apathy that seems to be around this Irish football team, because I think that's a general feeling around it, no? Like, I don't think that, okay, there's elements of anger here and there, but mostly it's people who are kind of like a little bit miffed with what's going on. And to be honest with you, a lot of people can take or leave the Ireland team right now, which is a sad state of affairs.
I think in previous instances, whenever there was anger, we had enough good players around for you to be able to go, well, hang on a second, we have Richard Dunn, we have Shay Given, we have Robbie Keane, we have whoever else. If Duff was still around, whenever the anger was being felt, it was like, there's the bones of a good team there. At the moment, who are you pointing to really that's going to massively improve the team who's not around and not available? Like, is Declan Rice going to transform our nation's fortunes at this stage of his career for the next campaign, for this campaign? He's not. Like, is there a bunch of players out there? I think that's... So definitely, say you had the best manager in world football, right, who was managing this group of players or the available resources to him, you would expect that we would be doing better.
Yes.
You would expect that we would be trying to be a Northern Ireland or a Wales without Gareth Bale. But, like, who is that manager who's going to take this job at this point and transform our fortunes by the 10 or 15% that each player needs to improve? Like, maybe fully fit, if you've got James McCarthy fully fit and playing well, and Robbie Brady fully fit and playing well, and Seamus Coleman fully fit and playing well, and you can find a way to get Matt Doherty in the team. Maybe there's the bones of a 3-5-2 there that can play international football and be effective, and there's a little bit of depth, tiny bit of depth for everybody, but like, people aren't always fit.
No, well, that's the nature of the beast. Like, it is kind of a line that is trundled out a bit. Well, who do you get? Who is the replacement? And the fact of the matter is, you do, like, I'm not sure, do you turn on any of the Nations League games over the last month or so, and you kind of see very average teams playing a better style of football than we are. And do we get too bogged down in how we're playing, considering we're still in with a chance? Say if we win tonight in a crap 1-0, do we then park the style once again, like we've done on many an occasion during the Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane era?
I mean, maybe part of the point of international football is that, like, and as the managers always say, you've got so little time to work with the teams that you don't play that good football. So I was at the Northern Ireland Germany game in the Euros. Was it 1-0 in the end? Was it 1-0, I think?
Yeah.
Was it an all draw?
God, that was like the night before Ireland played Sweden, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think, no, Germany beat them, didn't they? 1-0, wasn't it? It was a close fought encounter anyway.
They killed them. Whatever the score was, they absolutely killed them. Euro matchday 3 of 3, 2016, 1-0. Germany beat them 1-0. But Germany had like 15 chances, and the goalkeeper had a brilliant game. And
that's Germany, though.
28 shots. But Northern Ireland is the point. Like, they're held up as this paradigm of team. Like, they can win matches. We should be somehow aspiring. Like, they play really bad football, is my point. Most international teams play really bad football at our level, right? Beyond the Division 1 of the Nations League. And we have this obsession with, like, trying to play brilliant football. like, ultimately, maybe in tournaments you should expect teams to play reasonable football. For these games, it's about getting results and having some kind of a sense of who you are. And we didn't have that against Wales. We didn't have that against the Danes when they hammered us. Like, we haven't had that for a period of time now. So what you're supposed to be able to do with the small servings of the players, we're not doing. And that's the indictment, I feel, of O'Neill at this point. It's not that, like, he hasn't turned that midfield or any of the strike partnerships into Barcelona, because it ain't going to happen.
When you look on the black and white of it all, how have Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane underachieved with this Ireland team? You could probably say that they haven't underachieved at all. Like, they got to the Euros. They missed out on the World Cup. Ireland aren't supposed to be making the World Cup. This is not a top 32 in the world's team. So they have, like, in the black and white of things, just, like, they've got level par. I would say that that's the case. So the problem is, when you say, what are we supposed to be, what is the identity of this team? It's not, when I say style, probably style is the wrong word. Like,
5-1's not level par.
5-1's probably the...
Do you know what I mean?
Well, the 4-1 to Wales, you mean?
No, the 5-1 to Denmark.
Oh, to Denmark, sorry, yeah, of course. Those two were the results, so that's changed it dramatically. But, like...
They were level par up to that point, and now, like...
But I mean, overall, when you talk about the major tournament qualification, which, as you say, like international football, that's what it's all about. It is all about reaching these moments, and then perhaps when you get there, perhaps express yourself in a better way. Like, what is the identity of this football team? Like, I don't really know. Like, how many of the players know? I presume Martin O'Neill has some sort of idea what it is, and, like, obviously getting results in international football is more important than an identity, but if the results are coming consistently, it only covers that up. And I'm not sure we have that. The thing is, Callum Robinson came on the other night and changed the game. Is Callum Robinson a game changer of a player? Is he of that level who can change an international match against an all-right Denmark team? He's not. There came with him an attitude shift, and why that attitude isn't there all the time, I don't know why.
Yeah. All right, look, we'll come back to this. If anybody has any opinions on it, you can hit us up on Twitter @OffTheBall or at OffTheBall AM. We're also on youtube.com/OffTheBall, and of course you can get us on facebook.com/OffTheBall as well. A reminder, of course, that OffTheBall AM is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Now, let's move on, because there's loads of stuff that we want to talk about. Jack Anderson is the Professor and Director of Sports Law Studies at the University of Melbourne, and he joins us on the line all the way from down under this morning. Jack, good morning to you, or good evening to you.
Yeah, good morning to you all.
There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. The violence in the GAA is the first thing that we kind of dropped you a line about last week when the story was circulating. But I did want to get your thoughts on UFC. I know you've written extensively in the past about the legality of boxing, and there have been calls from some quarters at the weekend to ban UFC. I know you've done a bit of work around MMA in Ireland as well. What's your legal opinion, your consensus view on what the sport, the standing of the sport, where it should be, what we should be doing with it?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing is I'm not a fan of UFC. I don't understand it. I'm more a boxing fan. I'm an out-and-out boxing fan. But I suppose the first thing, you have to distinguish between the UFC and MMA. I mean, UFC is, as you have said, a commercial entity, and it's legal to hold such events in some places. In some states in the US, it's illegal in others. And here, even in Australia, some states allow it, some states don't. So I think UFC 221 was in Perth, for example, but it had to operate under a statutory framework. So in some ways, it's almost outside of any regulation. So even so, with the McGregor thing, Nevada State Commission, the State Athletic Commission, can hand down bans, but that's not a ban against the UFC. In fact, when you get the individual UFC fighters, they can just get a flag of convenience and get a license to fight somewhere else. So, I mean, that's out there. One of the things that I found, and I read Joe Brawley's piece, for example, on the UFC, and his calls to ban it. I mean, the thing about that is, I mean, the UFC are going to take absolutely no notice of what Joe Brawley says, or indeed what I say. But what I did think was, I did a little bit of work for Sport Ireland on the regulation of MMA here in the Republic. I'm the view it should be regulated. I think you're much better off being transparent about the regulation of it. And I think, though, in an indirect way, what happens in the UFC does have a negative effect. Because there's a lot of people within sports administration, there's a lot of people within combat sports who don't want to regulate MMA. I think that's the best way to deal with it. Our problem in Ireland was who exactly is the MMA community? So you can regulate a sport like the GAA through its clubs and soccer, but are there clubs in MMA Ireland? Are they just gym memberships, or what exactly are they? So that was the problem we had with it. But I certainly think regulation of MMA is hugely important, because remember, it is the amateur sport, and there's a pathway between the youth and those who want to compete at senior level. You've got to get that right with a combat sport. The UFC itself, that's out there. I mean, the one thing I would say about the UFC is, and it maybe reflects with Joe Brawley's article as well, is you see, you know, those recent fights, you saw a lot of blood and facial cuts, etc. With boxing and the way professional boxing has gone now, it's a lot to do with headshots. The bleeding is inside the brain. I mean, you have to face up to the fact that in both UFC and boxing, direct, intentional, and fictional violence is the name of the game. It's the hurt business, you know. So I think the best thing to do is regulate it, you know. And a lot of people have quoted this John McCain comment, you know, Senator John McCain's comment about human cockfighting.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that was in the context of a debate to whether or not we federally in the US regulate the sport. So, you know, that's where they're going, and I think that's where everyone should go.
Yeah. In terms of how that would impact the sport in Ireland, what type of regulation would you like to see? Would it be around the hosting of events? Would it be around the ability to call yourself a licensed MMA trainer or practitioner, or to, you know, like, how would the regulations work in practice, do you think?
Yeah, all of the above is the answer. I mean, just because you're a regulated sport doesn't give you a kind of a license to do things, you know, generally, or it doesn't mean that you directly come under the control of, say, Sport Ireland. What it does is it gives you the capacity to build all the key and the boring governance stuff. So safety for boxers or safety for fighters outside the ring in terms of weights and all that, safety within the ring in regards to training of referees and umpires, etc., and thereafter, and care thereafter. But also qualification for who's coaching the people, particularly at kids level. Now, MMA in Ireland, they are doing it. You know, there are entities there that are doing it. And we met with people like John Kavanagh, etc. So they are doing it. But it's to get the critical mass of people to do it and get the actual policies uniform and on paper. That's the first step. And it's the first step, not because Sport Ireland want it, but just your duty of care towards the participants.
Yeah.
The sport is growing, and we have to realise that.
I remember thinking a little bit about this at the time, that actually what the Nevada Athletic State Commission does is act as a sanctioning body for events in whatever the combat sport is. At the moment, like even the Boxing Union of Ireland, and I remember thinking a little bit about this and trying to get to the quasi-legal status that they held. So they can license events, professional boxing in Ireland, but they're not really regulated either. They're kind of it's almost by the fact that they're such an old organisation that there's no real sense of, if they make up rules, no one is there to say, no, sorry, you can't do that. Whereas actually maybe the right thing to do is to have Sport Ireland act as a sanctioning body, or an offshoot of Sport Ireland act as a sanctioning body for combat sports. So there's a basic minimum standard there.
Absolutely, you know, basically, and it's the same with the British Boxing Board of Control. They're self-regulatory bodies, which is an old historical thing. I mean, here in Australia, certain states have specific legislation which regulates combat sports. Every single aspect of it, from the timekeepers to the umpires to the judges to the combat sports inspectors, every single aspect is regulated. And it has to be because of the nature of the sport. That's just a recognition of it. You know, and it goes right down to the medical care that would be provided at ringside. It's not that difficult to do, actually. You know, we have some sports that already operate on a statutory basis, horse racing, greyhound racing. We could easily do that, you know, for combat sports. There would be resistance within, you know, say the Boxing Union of Ireland, that's, you know, and they would say their record is pretty good. That's fine. But the regulation of MMA, Sweden has a kind of a version of that. That's the one I would look at if we were going to do it in Ireland. And I think we have to take the pragmatic view. I'm not an MMA fan. You can see by the look of me, I don't, you know, participate in it. But I think that's the way we're going to have to go, regulation.
Just if we kind of suspend reality here for a moment, Jack, and we perhaps go into this alternate reality where, say, MMA becomes illegal in this country, or UFC becomes illegal in the United States. Joe Bradley says the term make UFC illegal. I'm not sure that he actually mean MMA, but let's just take that example for a moment. What would the reality be? Is there an appetite from your research for an underground mixed martial arts scene?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the argument, that if you don't regulate it, this sport will go underground. You know, that's always the kind of thing that's made, and it's made with a lot of sports. But that's not an excuse. If something deserves to be criminalised, it deserves to be criminalised, and the police can follow it up. But I think with MMA, you've got to kind of look at it in terms of the regulation rather than the criminalisation. You know, and the interesting thing is, at present, the legal status of MMA is a bit up in the air. We don't necessarily know what exactly the legal status is. Even a sport like boxing, the only reason it's legal is because of an old historical anomaly, you know. So we don't actually know what the status of MMA is. And therefore, if something happens at an MMA event, despite it being licensed, we're not quite sure what the criminal law and civil law aspects of it are. So I would think, for everyone's sake, that we get it regulated.
Do you think that the UFC has in some way hampered the image of mixed martial arts? That, like, we had Chris Fields in studio here with us last week, who does great work out at Straight Blast Gym in Swords, where there's people coming in who actually, like, they use MMA as kind of their mode of fitness and things like that. And I guess the sort of bravado and the ridiculous scenes that we saw in Vegas last week are actually doing a lot more damage to the sport as an organisation, and that the UFC really needs to have a long, hard look at itself rather than the sport itself.
Absolutely. The sport is MMA, and I heard that interview, and there's so much going on, and we have to recognise that, you know, and that's why I think regulation is important. UFC is a commercial entity, particularly, you know, and it was recently bought out there again, and they're commercial operators. They don't care about you know, the regulation or where they'll get licensed, so long as they do get licensed and so long as they make money. So, for example, they were absolutely and lobbied hard to get regulated in New York, because that opens up Madison Square Garden, and that's the way they operate. And they could disappear quite quickly in terms of a commercial organisation, and then the sport of MMA is left. And I think that's what we've got to concentrate on, because you've got the kids coming into the sport, you've got amateurs, and like with all sports, the vast majority of participants are at the bottom pyramid.
Yeah, this is an uncomfortable segue for a lot of people, but actually we did get you on to talk about violence in the GAA, and it was the Downpatrick game in particular where there were people vaulting over the touchline that really looked exactly the same as Khabib vaulting into the crowd after the fight at UFC. So you've got a bunch of ideas, and we can stick the sidebar back up in a minute so there you see the vaulting over, and it's just like, it's not a million miles away from somebody jumping into the crowd. It's just, this is the local version of what's happening in the MGM grounds. And it is uncomfortable for people to draw any parallels here, but there's a lawlessness about these games that we're seeing maybe more often because of the fact that people have camera phones at them, and maybe this was always there in Irish life, but the fact we've just discovered it doesn't mean that we shouldn't think that this is something that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I would be uncomfortable enough, you know, making that distinction, or that kind of cross between UFC and, you know, what happens in a county down club match. But I do take the point. One of the things, and looking at that video in particular, one of the things that you see is absence is the ball. The ball isn't there. I mean, it's nothing got to do. It's off the ball. It's actually off the pitch as well. And I think my general thing on this, and I've been saying it for years and years and years, is that when you look at those, just at first instance, I'm not accusing any individual, but all the aspects of a criminal assault are made out. Okay, and that's what we've got to. Just because you're wearing a jersey, just because you go to play a game of ball beyond the touchline, doesn't mean that the criminal law does not apply. It certainly does. And we have seen examples in Ireland of it applying. And also, one of the things that people need to remember as well, that if you punch someone else on the field of play and you injure them, no insurance will cover you for that. If that person is injured and they require dental work or jaw reconstruction, you may be personally liable. Okay, and we have a litigious society, and it's going to come to that, where people go, I got my jaw broken in a GAA football match. I'm missing 6 weeks of work. My club insurance doesn't cover it. well, I might be tempted to go on a civil action, and we've seen it in other sports. The example I always give is, ice hockey was pretty lawless in the 70s and 80s, and then we had a big punch up in 2004. A guy called Steve Moore got a punch in an NHL game. It's a very famous example. Criminal investigation, huge civil action, and eventually police and prosecutors said to the ice hockey authorities, enough at the elite level, enough at the lower levels. These are criminal assaults. Either you deal with them or we will deal with them. And I think we could be coming to the stage with the GAA that's where we're at. When one of the things I always hear about this is, don't worry about it because the victim will have to press charges. The victim doesn't have to press charges. The police can intervene if they so want to, or the GAA could refer matters to law enforcement if they felt it was serious enough. And I was had a bit of a smile. I don't know, did you see the NFL game, the Patriots? And it was the Kansas City Chiefs. And one of the Kansas City Chiefs players scored a late touchdown, and one of the Patriots fans threw beer at them. And banned for life from the Patriots, charged with public disorder by the local police. You see in GAA, a supporter would reach across the fence and punch a player, and we'd all laugh if you talked about a criminal sanction. Well, maybe we're coming to the point where, if the GAA isn't going to act, well, then maybe the courts will. And that's what we want to avoid.
We do want to avoid it, but we also want to get to a point where people go to play sports. The McGeaney quote at the start of Off the Ball, if you want to box, say, when I box my box. Like, do most senior footballers really go to matches with the intention of boxing? And, like, what? There seems to be a cultural tolerance for it.
No, I mean, last week Tommy Martin in The Examiner had a good piece about the fight in the schoolyard and all that, but the one thing I thought he left out was, for some of us who didn't engage in the fights but we almost had to go to see the fight. Most of us didn't want to, scrap. Most of us just wanted to play ball, and I think that is the case. But I also think it's the case that people, and we've seen it in the GAA all the time, they say, oh, the referee wasn't great. There were so many yellow cards, fight was inevitable. Or, there are other background reasons why, or the GAA disciplinary things aren't consistent enough. They don't make you punch someone else. That's, you do it. And I think there is an element of personal responsibility. But I also do think that one of the things we should look at is we tend to engage with fines in the GAA, which I think is meaningless because it's GAA money. It's GAA money that circulates. So I don't think fines are. And we go after individual players, that's fine. Why not have kind of suspended sentences so that in a way that if you violate or commit an infraction again, the suspended sentence commence? Or why don't we go after the club itself as a whole? I think that's an important, that, for example, where a club reaches a certain amount of yellow or red cards in a season, and then a club-based sanction kicks in. I mean, one of the things I hear all the time from the GAA is, well, there are thousands of matches that occur and nothing ever happens. That may be true. Well, reward that good behaviour and punish the bad behaviour, and do so in an open and transparent manner. That's an idea. But there are so many other ideas, and I think I just saw that Irish News article today, and the quote, I think it was from Alan Milton, and GAA authorities will not intervene. And I can see why they want to give due process and all that. And I suppose the first thing is to say about that is the GAA rulebook does everything. It does everything with procedural fairness. I mean, every single element of procedural fairness is there, sometimes so much that we distract from what actually happens, and that's one thing that we need to look at. The rule book needs to be clearer and more definitive. It's all over the place at the minute, and there's no doubt about that. Just even look at the different types of infractions, there's subclause and this and that. You can clear that up, and I think they are doing that. The one big thing I would think is, and Enna McGinley picked up on it as well, is centralise it. There are some things in the rule book that are serious offences, assaulting a referee or disrupting a match so it has to be ended prematurely. They should go directly from the county board to central authorities. Not because we don't trust the county boards, it's nothing to do with that, but to make the point that we take assaulting a referee very seriously as an association as a whole, and that you have to come up and explain yourself in Croke Park as to what you did. And I think that's an important statement. It's a very small rule change, but I think it could be effective in that general way.
There is also the other element of this, and I don't want to sort of trivialise what happens before the actual violence that we've seen in these games, but Mark O'Shea touched on it in the Mail on Sunday at the weekend, where he spoke about the sledging that goes on, and he witnessed one club county championship match down in Kerry recently, where an inter-county player was sledged right in front of his face by a young up-and-coming player. The referee overheard it. It wasn't a great use of words, apparently. It was actually quite bad, and the black card wasn't used in that situation, which is one of the reasons why the black card was introduced, is to get people who are sledging off the pitch. Now, in your view, do you think that should be kind of implemented in a more harsh way, I guess, because ultimately in a lot of these cases it is the sort of spark that lights the dynamite when it comes to these brawls, that there is something said, there is a bit of sledging going on without justifying the reaction. This is an example in many cases.
Yeah, I would think that. And one of the things, just looking at those new rule changes, like I'm not going to say anything about the playing rule changes, they have to be tried, but I thought the one on the sin bin, I was just thinking, you have to get 2 yellows before you get a sin bin. I mean, I would call that the venial sin bin. You really have to sin before, you can actually. And I just, look, ladies Gaelic football have the ordinary sin bin, whereby, 10 minutes in the bin. And I think something like that takes the heat out of a lot of situations, Instead of this accumulation of yellow cards, referees seem to be reluctant to use the black card. There's an accumulation of yellow cards. And I know from playing matches myself, it builds up and it builds up. But if you sin bin them for 10 to 15 minutes, that might help. So I think that on-field thing helps as well. Because also with a sin bin, you're punishing the team as a whole. They're down for 10 or 15 minutes. The player is coming off, he gets the death stare from the manager, and the message gets across, But also, I think you can also experiment a little bit with underage matches as well. You can be tougher with underage matches. And one of the things, I think you've covered it as well, is a lot of this is coming from poor sideline behaviour with parents and with kids. They start mouthing and slobbering at referees, and that it builds up and it builds up. And I think really, the GAA has various other mechanisms. I think it has a big forum for healthy clubs coming up soon. Well, a healthy club is a disciplined club, and you start right there. And, if you mouth to the referee, it's a penalty or a free kick immediately to the other team, and it's moved up. You start right at the bottom there, and I think that would help as well. So both on field and off field, and then just you can tinker with the disciplinary process as well.
When you're saying that you understand that the GAA obviously don't want to intervene with due process in the current cases, I totally understand that. There's no point in them now saying we're going to make an example of this one club, because that ends up getting overturned on the basis of all sorts of rules that are in the rule book. What they do need to do, though, is essentially say, we take this very seriously, and we've decided that collectively as an organisation, somehow we are going to affect change, so that the scenes that we're seeing this year won't be repeated next year and won't be repeated the year after. Because otherwise, this just becomes a video on a loop.
Oh no, it does. And I was looking back over doing some research for the Examiner article this week, and I've kind of written about the same theme for nearly 10, 12 years now, and it's usually predicated by some violent event or even some criminal action. And one of the things that frustrates me about the GAA, and I do care about it very deeply, one of the things is, in January, you'll have a debate about why do we have all these pre-season competitions? And then it'll go on to, well, does anyone take the league seriously? What about the fixtures? It always follows the same pattern. And around this time of year, we always have the club violence thing. There are simple things you can do about it. You can do about it by centralising some of the disciplinary things. You can do it with the sin bin idea. And there are other ideas that you can, but you need the will to do them and do them now. We actually have in the GAA lots of disciplinary bodies, and every provincial council has separate disciplinary bodies that are underutilised. They could be used to step in from time to time. And also, I've been saying this for years, but the GAA is an unusual organisation in that I did a lot of work actually for the FAI and their appeals body. They have a central full-time disciplinary unit. It's small. GAA doesn't have a central full-time disciplinary unit. And, maybe we could do with that in terms of prosecuting these serious cases, but also getting the message out to county boards, etc., that we need to clamp down.
and writing the rule book so that the rule book is based on, okay, anytime we've tried to prosecute somebody under this rule, they get off on this technicality. We're changing it so that that technicality gets closed. It's like a living organism that learns and adapts.
Yeah, it's like a tree ring. We keep adding, layer on layer onto it. Now, there's some really good people within the GAA who can do that. Liam Keane, for example, who's been there. They're very good people. But you almost need to start. I think the GAA rule book is something like 260 pages, double-sided, singles. It's a huge rule book. And of course there are going to be loopholes in it. But there's also another side to it is, when are we going to start accepting these type of bans as well? We talk the talk about it, but then immediately when it's one of our own club members, we're in there searching for a loophole. So there's that as well. But yeah, definitely clarify the rule book, make it about the substantive issue, and render those procedural issues secondary.
Jack, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this evening.
No problem. See you.
That's Jack Anderson there in Melbourne talking to us about the rule book and also the situation with MMA.
Yeah, when you talk about those two things, and I think there's been a lot written over the last fortnight about how those two things are linked, from Vegas 2 weeks ago to the violence we see in the club scene. Are we really that impressionable as a race of people? Are young lads involved in those matches? I guess probably the youngest people involved in those matches, 17, right up to the age of probably 37 in a lot of those club matches. Are they really impressionable enough to actually take on board what's actually going on in the world of MMA? Maybe they are. It's more of a hypothetical question. I don't know what you think.
Are human beings impressionable?
Well, I would say
yes.
Grown adults.
Yes, of course. How does advertising work?
To the point, well, okay, fair enough, but to the point of actually changing human behaviour.
Yes.
To the point of becoming outwardly violent.
You don't think that there's a bunch of people who see and copy other people who are violent and use violence as a means of success? You don't think there's a bunch of, you haven't seen a bunch of McGregor haircuts and McGregor hats and McGregor gear?
Well, that was what I was just about to say, because part of me agrees with that when you talk about McGregor and the way he winds up his opponents as the fight game, and that point I was making earlier on about sledging being a huge part of this and a huge part of the underbelly, which is to a certain extent an unsolvable problem when it comes to the rule book. It's a solvable problem when it comes to a culture shift, and maybe when they see people like Conor McGregor being so successful because of some of the stuff he spouts, does it sort of inspire them to say things on a football pitch? Maybe it does. I've got a bit more faith in people. Maybe I'm too kind of accepting that it's very convenient for us to say, look at that awful sport over there that's influencing and poisoning our young football players. When in actual fact, it might be something that comes from within, that there is.
Sorry, it's that's a fraction of it. But this predates McGregor. Those all-out brawls existed
totally
in Irish sport since the 1840s.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's of course people are impressionable, but to the point where Conor McGregor is the sole responsibility for it.
No, but definitely it's an exacerbating factor, as is the fact that a bunch of South African teenagers are taking steroids to play rugby, right? According to the stats, 9%. 9% of Irish teenagers are taking steroids to look good. Are none of those playing sports? Are none of the people involved in the brawls that we've seen a bit of roid rage? Is there no steroids at all in club GAA and club rugby? Of course there is.
Probably more likely in club GAA. How much do you get tested as a club footballer?
I don't think you get tested at all. Who's gonna tolerate testing?
That's the thing. Maybe there is a bit of roid rage going on. Maybe there is a bit of Conor McGregor mirroring going on. It's just it's a poisonous cocktail. I think elements of it are borderline unsolvable when it comes to the rule book.
So make the rule book much more straightforward. Get somebody like him and Brawley to write it, right? So that Brawley, when he's defending people, is shit, it's my own rules, I can't break them, or those rules are unbreakable. And then get the cops involved. Get the Gardaí to say, the next time there's an assault on a GAA pitch or a rugby pitch or a soccer pitch or a basketball game, we're going to prosecute and we're going to intervene, and we've decided that our sport is now skill-based, and we are going to, the sport of Gaelic football and hurling in particular are manly enough within the rules that you don't actually need to be a sneaky prick.
Yeah. Like, okay, so you get Brawley and Jack Anderson involved on a GAA level.
Whoever.
Yeah,
okay. A high-powered rules commission to simplify the rule book, and then you get all the counties to sign up to say, we're not giving you any funding. If you're going to challenge us on any of this issue, we're not giving you any funding. Jack Anderson had a great idea about carrot and stick. If clubs reach a certain number of yellow and red cards, they don't get funding. If clubs don't reach a certain number of yellow and red cards, they win a league and they get extra funding. It's like we incentivise good behaviour,
sure.
we disincentivise bad behaviour, but ultimately we make the individuals responsible. If you go on the field and punch somebody and do damage to them, we're going to prosecute you. There won't be any, nobody saw it. 8,000 people at a match and nobody saw it.
And that involves willpower from the state as well to actually change law. Like, I mean, there has been court cases taken over assault in the GAA, obviously, and a lot of them have fallen flat in their face because of a lack of evidence and things like that. Actually being able to make those loopholes would probably never happen in terms of law, but in terms of will from the state, it probably will happen because the GAA is such an important thing. On the yellow-red cards, tallying them up and handing down bans, I totally accept you're not saying that this is the be-all and end-all to the solution, but that comes down to referees. And like it's one domino.
But it's just a million steps.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm just also saying that like one of the other factors is that refereeing at the moment just simply isn't good enough. And to say that you might get a ban because of a decision that a referee takes in terms of the amount of yellow or red cards, given the wide variations of it.
Accumulated over a season though, you would assume that you're not going to get the hanging judge every week. He gives your team eight yellows and 2 reds every week for 10 weeks and suddenly you're like, oof, we just squeaked in. No? Like,
who knows? I mean, like you can't really put anything beyond the bounds of possibility when it comes to GAA refereeing.
All right, calling all students, we've teamed up with Vodafone X to give you the opportunity to fuel your passion for sport by joining Team Off the Ball for an entire week. You'll get to see what happens behind the scenes of a show, attend a press conference, help report at a match, and even feature as a co-host of the show. Owen's shifting very uncomfortably in his seat right now. If that wasn't enough, you'll also receive an iPhone 8 with a year subscription to Vodafone X Sport, giving you access to 7 dedicated Sky Sports channels. To be in with the chance to win, submit your demo tape and details to offtheball.com/Vodafone X. We're particularly interested if you're a Snapchat or Instagram whiz, then get your entry in now, offtheball.com/Vodafone X. James Richardson joined Joe last night on the football show to chat about the passing of former Channel 4 Serie A commentator Peter Brackley.
This wasn't something that happened every week.
Sure.
But there were occasions when, for either technical reasons or in one case because of a riot that followed a fatality in Genoa, when the decision was made to switch the game. Now, on that occasion, Peter and I'm not sure who was co-commentating, probably Ray, would have had a little bit of warning that they were going to effectively be doing an entirely different match from a foreign country with 2 sets of foreign teams. I mean, they obviously had some knowledge of these teams, but at the same time, it was quite a big ask. On, I think, at least one other occasion, there was a technical problem and they just switched the feed, or the wrong feed came up on the satellite, and Peter and Ray just had to kind of roll with it. But he was never spooked by anything, I don't think. And it's really sad. It's not. He'd been unwell for a while. He came back from. He'd been living abroad in Spain, and he came back a few years ago and hadn't been well.
Right.
But it's just really sad that at 67 he goes. He leaves us, and also that we didn't get more of him. He was literally my favourite football commentator ever, and I'd love to have heard him continuing to work kind of right up until now.
That's James Richardson paying tribute to Peter Brackley, the voice of a lot of people's youth watching Italian football on Channel 4, and I think Network 2 also carried the same package, so a lot of people around the country would have been familiar with the voice of Peter Brackley. A lot of people are very pissed off by the fact that we mentioned the Brawley piece at the weekend. Isle Cody says, I'm surprised Brawley isn't blaming MMA for GAA violence. Do we ignore assaults at GAA games because it's a more Irish sport? Hypocrisy is alive and well here at Off the Ball AM. The UFC is not MMA. And
that was the one glaring thing about the piece, was he's asking to ban UFC. It says it on the headline on the very front of the newspaper, and then he kind of repeats it near the end of the piece as well, that he just, I don't know, maybe he really does want to ban the UFC, but like why would you ban the UFC and not ban MMA?
Well, because you can regulate MMA. The UFC promotion are the ones that are actually leading to the horrific fights and the copycat stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe the Bellator fights are just as bad, but it doesn't seem as if it's as egregious and as grotesque as the UFC?
Maybe the sense I got from the piece, like I can't refute that because I haven't seen enough Bellator fights. But the sense I got from the piece was, like, as you say, it is the grotesque nature of the actual fights that appalled Joe Brolly, or in his view, the grotesque nature of the fights, and that's why he wanted them to be banned. Like, fair enough. Like, I think you can have a lot of hatred towards the UFC without having a lot of hatred towards the MMA, and maybe that's his point. Then fair enough.
Connor Moole says the UFC is to blame for GAA violence. Might be the worst discussion ever had on At Off the Ball. Did you have that discussion?
Well, I was kind of wondering. Remember, we just had that conversation about whether or not people are impressionable enough to the point where you can actually make that argument.
You can definitely say that people have been influenced by Conor McGregor, that he's a cultural phenomenon that has impressed a lot of people and who has a lot of copycats out there. Dean Kane on YouTube says, stuck 100 on England to win 2022 last night. 3-0 up against Spain. I had visions of footballs coming home. And 3-2, you still happy with your 100 quid on England to win 2022? I don't know what odds you got, Dean. Maybe you'd get back in touch and tell us. Dean Kane.
England in the desert.
Superman.
England winning in the desert. Will that happen? I know it's going to be November, December time.
Juan Jose 16 says, Darren may have a point, I may be wrong, but I don't think the panel on GAA rule changes had any direct input from current GAA players/managers. I mean, Brian Cuthbert is as recent a manager as was available, no doubt, and David Collins is pretty recent as well, so I don't have any issue with the people behind it at all. I think they're very good, intelligent, they went about it the right way, they came up with a concept, there's a proper thought process gone into the rules, and it's going to be difficult for them to get them through. And maybe some of the rules should go through for a fixed period of time, and then you can go, okay, we have evidence from Section A and Section B. But fundamentally, the problem is the fixtures and the tournaments are bullshit.
Well, they should bring in the rules for the provincial championships next year.
Not the league.
Not the league, because nobody cares about the provincial championships. So maybe this would make us actually watch these games with a little closer intent, because there's new rules being applied. The league is the best competition we have in Gaelic football.
A root and branch overhaul is needed. We can't rely on the kids of Irishmen living in England. Ireland needs to get serious about football or it will die, as other sports offer better opportunities, says Patrick Somerville. Football's never going to die because all you need is a ball and everybody can play it in their back garden or on the street or wherever it is that people play football in the schoolyard. It's never going to die.
No.
It's always going to be around. It's whether or not we're any good at it and whether or not we are managing our resources properly. That's it. That's the question there. And he's right. We can't be relying on the kids of Irishmen. It's not going to get us anywhere. Conor Whelan says apathy is far worse than anger when it comes to the Irish football team, and as of right now, that's exactly how I feel about the current situation. With anger, you have hope, right?
Exactly.
You're angry because you think there's a reason to be angry.
Exactly. I'm with Conor on that one. I think apathy is definitely my main emotion as well.
Paul Littlehayden, Paul says for teams in League B for teams in League B, 1 or 2 international class players make a massive difference.
Of course they do. And that's the reason Denmark and Wales are in League B on the basis that they have Gareth Bale and they have Christian Eriksen in tow. They don't have those players available. We should have been going out looking for the win on Saturday night, and we hopefully go out looking for the win tonight, but I don't hold my breath.
Let's move on. The 20x20 campaign was launched yesterday morning at the Google Foundry. Hopefully you caught us broadcasting live from there. It's a national movement to champion girls and women in Irish sport. The campaign is calling on the people of Ireland and all those involved really in Irish sport and physical activity to get behind female sport in a concerted effort to increase media coverage, boost attendance and ultimately grow involvement in female sport and physical activity by 20% by the end of 2020. So it's 20% more coverage, 20% more attendance at games and 20% more participation. We brought you the panel yesterday with Jessica Harrington, Sarah Keane, Graham Shaw and Rena Buckley. You can watch that back over on our YouTube channel. You've probably seen the clips of Rena telling the story about being asked to present the medals to an under 14 and under 12s and then being asked not to present the medal to the under 12 boys team, which has generated a lot of debate, and it'd be interesting to see if that club in West Cork has any statement to make on it. But anyway, English football's record caps holder and manager of the Manchester United Women's Football Club, Casey Stoney, was also over as part of the launch, and she joined us in studio yesterday as well. We're going to bring you that interview in a moment, but first have a look at this. It's a video by 20x20 where they asked young girls around the country about what it was like to be an athlete in modern Ireland.
I love running, I'm very good at it. All my family calls me Speedy.
I'm black belt. I got a whack in the knee today, or a hurl.
When you get in the boat, you just get this rush.
Ronaldo, Paul Pogba, Usain Bolt, Jack McCaffrey, Rory McIlroy. Women's sports stars. I don't really know any of the girls, so. Whenever people are recording things, they don't want to record girls for some reason.
Oh, you have to come to this match, it's going to be great. And then the women's are just kind of like, oh, come if you can.
The only thing that they passed was if the teacher makes a rule saying you have to pass to 5 girls before you can score. In my head, I'd be like, you should have passed to me. In like real life, I just don't say anything.
A very special guest here with us in studio. Casey Stoney is the manager of Manchester United, but also the keynote speaker at the 20x20 event, which we streamed live for you yesterday here on OTB AM. So, Casey, first off, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the 20x20 campaign, because anybody who was in the room yesterday who got to actually see your talk understands exactly the distance that we have to come by virtue of the distance that you personally have managed to travel. A lot of people won't have seen that. They won't have had the opportunity to kind of get your backstory. But when you get asked to be involved in a campaign like this, it obviously means something to you on a visceral level.
Yeah, and it's very personal to me. You know, I come from an era where we used to have to pay to play, and I didn't have a lot of money growing up, where we wore massive kits that didn't fit. We had no changing rooms. We played on pitches that were poor. So, you know, we haven't had a lot of exposure. It's increasing. So when someone comes and asks me to be part of it, I jump at the chance, because it means we can have an impact. It means we can start influencing the right people to make the right decisions higher up, and start broadcasting and start showing women's sport all over.
The tagline, there was a bit of chat about this yesterday, if you can't see it, you can't be it. You couldn't really see it when you were a kid. There were no real role models for you to aspire to. It wasn't on TV. The games weren't. There wasn't a full-time professional league.
No, absolutely not. My role models were all men. And obviously, then I got banned from playing mixed sport at 11, so that became difficult. But not everybody's like me. So, you know, I was stubborn. I'm a fighter. I wanted to prove people wrong. I wanted to go and achieve. But there's so many barriers in the way. Now, that would put an awful lot of girls and women off. So you've got to have the vision. You've got to be able to see it. And little girls need to be able to go, do you know what? That's what I want to do when I'm growing up. And then once they've got the vision, they've got the dream, then everything structurally needs to be in place so that they can go and achieve it.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, not only do you have to be wildly talented, you also have got to be, you've got to have those mental characteristics that you point out there, like a level of stubbornness. Do you think that that's changed now, where I guess people with half the talent, people with half the mental aptitude are able to make that breakthrough, or is it still, are the odds still stacked against people like that?
I think if you're going to get to the top in any sport, you have to have the hunger, no matter what. You know, you've got to have a desire. It's a way to go to make sure that sport is accessible for all, that it becomes the norm, that girls play sport, we keep girls in sport. And when women have success, we talk about it on the same level as male success.
How important is it for you to be a role model to younger people? I mean, to be a role model for both boys and girls. I think that's something that we don't quite often state too often, that like you can be a model for, as I say, both boys and girls.
I was talking about it earlier. It's massive. As much as we're saying 50% of your audience is female, 50% of your audience is male as well. So if I'm talking to boys and girls of young ages, that young boy plays with that young girl in the playground. That young boy turns into a coach, a parent, a school teacher that then encourages girls to play sport, to play football. So we need to talk to everybody so that everybody encourages it to be the norm.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's this is a community effort that everybody has to decide that. Up until this point, we haven't really thought this through. We didn't really take full advantage of the natural human resources that we have. We kind of decided to alienate a good portion of people, stupidly.
I think it's a bit naive, because it's 50% of your audience. It's people that could be in your stands paying for season tickets, buying shirts, promoting women and, you know, women's sport. And I'm like, men or women, they should be able to be promoted. They should be able to have the same opportunities to be successful. And to make women's sport sustainable, we need bums on seats. You know, we need people buying tickets to come in the grounds, and we need sponsorship. The fact that there's less than 1% of sponsorship going towards women's sport is staggering.
You are the elite of the elite, though. Like, you 130 England caps, and like most people out there don't end up as good as you. It's kind of one of those truisms, and it's the rest of those people who we kind of also need to look out for, that not just the ones who end up being elite. And I like I say this for participation, male and female, unless we have people who are just coming to be social fans and, in that horrible word, consumers of sport, then we're at nothing really.
No, absolutely, and I couldn't agree more, and that's why parents are really important. So first and foremost, I'm a mum. So I need to show my children that it's okay for me to do sport, and then I'll encourage my children to do sport. So we don't just say dads can do sport, we need to encourage mums to do sport too, because then that pays off down the chain to their children. Same as women need to walk through the turnstiles and watch sport, the same as men, and women need to empower women, men need to empower men, and they need to transfer across as well and empower each other. When
you look back at your story, it seemed like there was 1,000 different times when you could have said no, here's my excuse. Your granddad was always late, you didn't have the money to play, you didn't make the cut the first time, you get dropped from the England team. Like, it is a fairly remarkable resilience that you showed. Where did that come from?
I think I was shaped by my experiences. I didn't have easy experiences as a child, and do you know what? I love proving people wrong, and I love proving that I can do something. So every time I had a setback, I think setbacks make you. I'm a big believer in that. I'm like, right, okay, I've had a setback, right, this is my opportunity for a comeback, this is my opportunity to prove myself, this is my opportunity to go one step further. And I am relentless in my hard work, I'm relentless in what I want to do, and the pursuit of excellence and where I want to achieve it. I was never the best player in any of my teams, never. I wasn't the most talented, but I probably was the most dedicated at times, and I think that comes from within. I think you're shaped by your experiences, but I also think I go, right, where do I want to end up? And that journey could be full of loads of bumps in the road, and I've got to navigate it, and I might go in a different direction at times, but ultimately I know where I want to go, and I have to keep my eyes and my focus on my end goal.
One last bit for me about this. Will you tell us about being under 11 and that kind of whole season of actually getting on the boys team?
Yeah, obviously my first experience was walking into the school for the boys team where we trained, and 45 minutes running around like a lunatic, and they wouldn't pass me the ball, they wouldn't talk to me. I was a girl. Girls don't play football. That was what I was told pretty much my entire career, and like I said, it wasn't until I smashed one of the big ones up against the wall and nicked the ball, and they were like, oh, this girl can play. And I played for that boys team for a whole season. I was laughed at, I was jeered. Parents didn't take me seriously. Well, they took me seriously after 10 minutes when I'd scored 2 goals because they wouldn't mark me. So, you know, I loved playing in the boys team. I became one of them. I won Players Player of the Year, which for me is still a highlight because it meant I earned their respect. But then at the end of that season, I got banned from playing all football because it was mixed sport and you weren't allowed to play it. So it was pretty much taken away from me at the age of 11.
It kind of still happens a little bit today. There's been that interaction recently with the England women's national team and some kid who was not allowed to play because the boys didn't want to play with her.
She was our mascot yesterday.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. So that all ended up in that. But like, there's a bit of it.
Still happens.
Exactly.
Oh, of course. Listen, I won a Special Achievement Award off the back of I'd like to think, a reasonably successful career, and I got a message telling me that, and I got a plate from the PFA, a really special plate of all my clubs, and I got a message saying, yeah, that plate can go back in the kitchen where you belong. So, you know, it's still there, it still happens, but we have to keep doing what we're doing, we have to keep fighting for equality, we have to keep producing quality performances on the pitch as players, making sure that we have success at international level, and then that drips down.
Yeah, you're currently head coach of Manchester United. Talk to us about the Manchester United operation. I guess it's kind of a sense of better late than never that Manchester United are back in the Super League.
Absolutely. And I understand why they didn't come in because, you know, having been in the club now for 6 months, I realise they don't make quick, bad decisions. They take their time, they get things right, and the structure wasn't right. Now, I've been at Arsenal, I've been at Chelsea, I've been at Liverpool, and I've never ever experienced anything like the level of support, the level of detail and the level of integration that I've now got at Manchester United.
How big is the gap between Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool and Manchester United in terms of facilities, in terms of resources?
In terms of facilities, they're all on a par. It's just the integration within the support structure within Man United that we get as staff. You know, we have marketing, commercial, ticketing, match day sales, they all look after the women's team. Every part of Manchester United's structure has a strategy for the women's team, and I've not quite experienced that, but then I wasn't a head coach at the other clubs. I was a player, so I might not have been as exposed to it as I am at Manchester United.
Sure, because like Arsenal, for example, would be quite well renowned for I guess having a women's operation that's world renowned and all that sort of thing. On the opposite scale of things, in your own playing days, I mean, your Charlton career is a great case study. We were speaking before we came on air that we had Stephanie Roach in studio last week, and she spoke about the fact that Sunderland getting relegated to League One in men's football this year meant that effectively the Sunderland women's team just went into a fully amateur level, and all the players on their books were basically let go. Something similar happened to you with Charlton.
Yeah, we played 2007. We played in the Women's FA Cup final against Arsenal in front of 24,000 people, and 2 weeks later we got a phone call to say the team was gone because the men's team had been relegated from the Premier League. They were making cuts, people were losing their jobs, and we weren't even full-time. You know, we were all part-time players at the time and didn't get an awful lot of money, but they completely pulled the budget, so we lost our team. And I was quite vocal about my disappointment of that at the time, and it still happens. It happened at Notts County last year. You know, the players went in and they were full-time and they all lost their jobs and their homes overnight because a new chairman had come in and decided that he wanted to, you know, make some cuts, and the women's team went. And it shows how far we've got to go because we still heavily rely on the funds from the men's team, and it's not sustainable yet.
It's almost a double-edged sword in a certain way, because I guess the attachment to Manchester United, the brand, is a huge thing to have, but ultimately attaching yourself to a men's operation clearly has its pitfalls, as you've seen firsthand, as Notts County have seen, as Sunderland have seen.
Yeah, that's the thing. I look at where I was at Charlton and I saw the pitfalls, and I look at the benefits now at Manchester United and what it can bring to the women's team and how it can change the profile of the women's game. So you want to be attached to a men's club because if it's done right, it gives you safety. It also gives you a massive platform to be able to grow the game. So I think if it's done right and done well, and you've got the security that that money's not going to go, it's fantastic to be part of a big men's club.
I did want to ask you about your management style, because you look at your counterpart at Manchester United in Jose Mourinho, and his management style has always been set up to win matches. Like, that is the sole thing he's got to worry about. He's got to worry about nothing else. You come over here to Ireland, you do a 20-by-20 conference. It's clearly something that matters to you, the growth of the game for women. Does that matter as a head coach of a top-class team, the brand of football that you play, to make sure that people are coming in through the turnstiles? Because it seems to me that as a manager of a team, your number one aim and your only aim really should be to win football matches, and having to worry about that could be something of a distraction. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
Yeah, I would disagree. I would think I have a massive responsibility as a head coach of one of the biggest clubs in the world to grow the game. Because we are growing the game. Jose doesn't have to worry about it because they've grown the game already. It's one of the biggest games in the world. Yes, we want to play exciting, we want to play expansive football, we want fans to come in and keep coming back because of the brand of football we play, but I want to develop players. I've got an average squad age of 21. I've brought in young players because we're going to go on a journey. It's a 5, 6, 7 year journey. We want to get to Champions League football. I need to develop those players to be able to get there. I want to work with them, and I also want to develop them as people. They're young people, you know, they're never going to earn enough money out of women's football. They're not going to have to get a job. So we need to make sure that once they walk away from us, they're a better person, better player, developed, and they can go and get a job.
You were talking earlier about having to pay to play, which I think a lot of people probably wouldn't be familiar with. When you wanted to play senior football, you had to pay for it, and your family couldn't afford it at the time. So the head coach didn't kind of waive the fees. But even now, if people want to become coaches, it's quite expensive to do your coaching badges the whole way through. You know, we hear all the time about X-player who's been in the league for 15 years at whatever club. He goes off and does his pro licence, but obviously he can totally afford it. It's this was something I think they came across in Michael Calvin's book.
Yeah, Emma Hayes was speaking to Michael Calvin. I'm not sure if you read it. Suffragette City is the name of the chapter in State of Play, Michael Calvin's new book. Brilliant chapter. Like, it's kind of eye-opening in terms of some of the barriers she's had to come through. But that was, as Ger says there, that's the first thing I didn't even think of that.
It's expensive to do your A licence. I think it's £5,000 or £6,000 now. I was very fortunate. I wouldn't have had that money to pay for that course, but the FA part-funded mine with the PFA to be able to put me on it, and the PFA put a specific course on for us. Right. Because we used to play through the summer, so we couldn't get on the courses, so they put it on in the winter for the female players. We did half of it at Tottenham. I did some at Blackburn, so I had an unbelievable experience of going through my coaching badges, but also the money in coaching isn't great. So you pay £6,000 for an A licence, and then potentially you're not guaranteed a decent income off of it. And, you know, I think that's the struggle that they have. And also, if you're investing in coaches, they should be paid a wage to develop players. If you want world-class players, you should be paying them money to be able to develop that.
Yeah, so it needs an injection of money at all levels. It's not just the Man Uniteds of the world, it's also the FA and the PFA. And then ultimately this kind of comes back to the sponsors stumping up somewhere along the way to be able to make that investment. That's what this is really all about, isn't it?
Yeah, like I said, I can't get away from that statistic that less than 1% of sponsorship goes towards women's sport. I think how much of a difference could you make? I also think brands are really missing out because there's some fantastic stories in women's sport. There's some great messaging that they could attach to those brands, and they could work with female athletes. They'd probably get a lot more time, a lot more access, and a lot more for their money.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me this morning that you said was that you found somebody when you weren't okay who told you that it was okay to not be okay. And this is the other aspect of sport that I think is, like, we talk about it on the fringes sometimes, but the role that it can play in mental health and the general well-being of society at large. And I was interested to hear you bring that up because a lot of people don't actually talk about it, and they don't kind of feel comfortable talking about the fact that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, I don't hide away from the fact I think sport saved my life. I really do. It was that important to me at the time. Without football, I'm not sure where I would be now. And it was actually through England and a psychologist that I dealt with a lot of the issues that I had, and I'm in the place I am now. And we don't talk about it because we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be able to cope with pressure. We're not supposed to be flawed. But we're all of those things because we're human.
Yeah. What do you think of the strong is the new pretty movement then at the moment? Because like it's double-edged sword. It's like the definitely getting away from the whole body image thing, which we absolutely desperately need to do as a society. But like weakness is okay too. Like let's get the best parts of being male and being female and try and meander a path between them, as opposed to going, well, we're going to take this bit in isolation. It might not necessarily lead us in the right place.
No, I completely agree. I just think, you know, we all have moments of weakness. We're all flawed in some ways. None of us are perfect, you know, and what does perfect look like? You know, we're all different. So I say you can be strong, athletic, and you still be feminine, you know. So I don't really potentially like the word pretty. It's not for me. I don't think it has the right connotations for what we're trying to achieve. I think you can be strong, you can be athletic, you can be feminine, you can be whatever you want to be. Ultimately, you should be judged on your talent and your talent alone.
It seems like there's lots of sliding doors moments in your life, and the sport is at the kind of the heart of them. Like, that's why stuff like this has to work, because there are so many people who don't have the sport to fall back on, or the talent, or the resilience to get out of it.
Absolutely, and not everybody wants to play elite sport. Not everybody is like me and is stubborn and potentially is resilient and wants to go there. There's too many opportunities to walk away. There's too many opportunities to quit, and there's so many barriers in the way. So this is so important, because it shouldn't matter whether you want to play to make friends, whether you want to play because you want to play for your country, or whether you just want to play because it's for exercise. It should be accessible to everybody, and it should be profiled so that every little girl can grow up going, do you know what? I want to play whatever I want, and no one's going to tell me I can't.
I hate to go back to the elite level here again, but just because it's a World Cup year next year, how are England set up under Phil Neville? It was a bit of, it wasn't a rocky start whatsoever. It was just the initial criticism from, I guess, all corners, particularly from the media, when he initially took over, that kind of viewed this thing as a rocky thing at the start. But it seems to have gone pretty well over the last couple of months. Yeah,
listen, I know Phil really well. He's a good friend of mine now, and he's doing a fantastic job. He's one of the good guys. He really is. He cares. You know, he's not gone into the job for money, I can assure you of that. He's done it because he wants the team to do well. He wants to be a manager, he wants to be a coach, he wants to work with elite players. And, you know, I thought the criticism he got at the start was really unfair, you know, and I think he's done a fantastic job to bring the team together after a very difficult period. You know, the stuff that happened with the previous manager left the team in a lot of turmoil, and he's done really well to bring that back together.
Yeah, because I had to look back just to see exactly what the criticism was. And in fairness, like you look at some headlines like Louise Taylor saying Phil Neville appointment to kick in the teeth for better qualified coaches, and Marina Hyde saying that the FA devotes serious time to analysing why it has reportedly been rejected by the more qualified candidates it shortlisted. That it seemed the criticism maybe was more towards the FA. Obviously you had Phil Neville and his tweets, which was subsequently clarified, but with regard to the appointment, it was more directed at the FA. Is that a fair enough summation?
I think the FA were in a really difficult position, to be honest, because I was quite involved in the process throughout, because I was in the leadership group with the national team. I knew what was going on. Now, they had a list of 10 candidates. They narrowed it down to 5. They went through an interview process. They got down to a final 3. Unfortunately, all 3 pulled out. So there was women in that. And they wanted to employ one of those 3. All 3 candidates pulled out, and then obviously they had to search elsewhere. And Phil was really, really keen to take the job on and do a good job. Also, selfishly, it raises the profile of the women's game by him being involved. So, I actually think it was a good appointment.
Yeah, you mentioned the difficult time before Phil Neville took over. Like the Eni Aluko case was something that obviously kind of took global storm, really. It was certainly as big a story over here as it was in the UK, I think. And looking back on that, I do wonder, obviously, and I do wonder if it was deeper than that, if it was an issue of gender, that it wasn't just an issue of this is a women's football embroiled in a racism case, that perhaps the way the FA looked after it in terms of the alleged hush money paid to Eni Aluko, that if that was a male footballer, would it have been dealt with in the same manner? I'm not sure. That's conjecture on my part, but that's certainly something that popped into my mind.
Yeah, I think what it raised was that we needed to change the policies in terms of the whistleblowing, and that if somebody needed to talk, they needed to know where to go to. So that was a real positive that came out of it. I don't know if it would have been managed differently if it was a male, because it's not necessarily happened, so I can't really speak on that. But I think the positives come out that there's now policies in place, and if someone needs to speak, they know where they can go, they know how to report it, and they know what to do.
Are they going to win the World Cup next year?
I think they've got every chance.
There's one last thing I just wanted to ask you about, and it's Becky Hammon and the San Antonio Spurs, because it's a case study that I'm fascinated with, and personally speaking, I would have thought that she deserves a head coach job already, and she probably should have got one already, but maybe she's just loyal to the Spurs franchise. And I'm not sure if you saw the Pau Gasol Players Tribune article last year, where he spoke about growing up in Spain, where his mother was a doctor and his father was a nurse, and people used to come over to the house to get them all mixed up with regard to their occupation. So he comes from a really good standing, and this idea that that a woman can't manage a men's dressing room is an absolute nonsense. As Gasol says, the NBA is seen as one of the most forward-thinking organisations in world sport. How necessary do you think it is for that step to happen, for it to follow through in football? Because, clearly, there's no reason why it shouldn't happen in football very shortly.
I don't think there's any reason, but I think it would be very difficult for that female to go into that environment. I really do. I'm the head coach of a women's team, and when I turn up to certain places with my assistant who's a male, and if they don't know us, they straight away go and introduce themselves to my assistant, thinking he's the boss.
Right.
The assumption's there that it's not me, that, some people don't even acknowledge me, and whether they think I'm the physio or not, and I sometimes think, well, even if I'm the physio, you should still acknowledge me. And it's actually sometimes my assistant, Willie, who's fantastic, you go, well, hold on a minute, she's the boss. So I think it would be a huge step. If it happened in basketball, it would probably break a massive barrier first so that it could come across to other sports.
This whole world, you're at it, right?
Absolutely.
That's mad.
Yeah. So it happens, and sometimes I get angry, and then sometimes I just think, well, they just need to educate themselves on. And also, it just shows where we're at in society, that the assumption is straight away the man must be the manager and the women isn't.
Are you guys all part of the LMA as well?
Yes.
Yeah, they're a good organisation. They're pretty progressive.
Yeah, they are very much so, and they've obviously started to do a Manager of the Month now in the Women's Championship as well, and they're looking at loads of different things in terms of educational courses and involving the women on that, so it's great.
Okay. Well, the last thing, you've 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy, is that right?
Yes.
You said that you hope that the 2 girls are going to have the same opportunities as your son. Do they, and will they?
I think opportunities. Will they ever, if they all took up football, would my girls ever earn the same money as my boy? No. But it's about opportunity. It's about them never feeling like they can't do something. And I think if they start having the opportunities and the exposure gets better, then it's a day I can dream of. Will I see it in my lifetime? I hope so, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Casey, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.